Hey, deserving listeners, it's time to continue our journey watching Darcey and Stacey on the channel TLC. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. Let's get to the show.
She came dressed to impress. Her high heels, her wedges, and bell-bottom jeans. She wanted to do it up. I think just to kind of create that first impression. You know, like maybe they're a cuter couple or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, so it just makes me really sad that whether real or imagined, there's this assumption of rivalry and comparison and putting them down, sort of boyfriend shame, fiance shame, if you will. And it's just so unfortunate. It really points to the potentiality that the two of them were neglected, mistreated growing up, and they both had to compete a lot for love and attention from other people. Because if they didn't beat the other person out and win in the competition, then they didn't get any love or attention.
You know, it's a picnic, you know, like.
Because I come from a big family. I have 3 siblings and a lot of cousins that are very close to me. And I'll tell you, I've never had that thought. I don't think anyone's had that thought about me. I mean, maybe mildly when we were young, but that idea of my boyfriend is better than yours or my outfit's better than yours, it is just not something that I've ever done. And why? Not because I'm a better person, but because my parents raised me better, and not because my parents are better people, but because my parents were raised pretty well too. It's the cycle of mistreatment that just gets passed down from generation to generation. For many of you watching right now, if you identify yourself as being mistreated growing up, you probably know enough by now that your parents were mistreated when they were growing up. You might even know, maybe you don't, what your grandparents went through when they were children. Learning that information can actually give you a lot of insight into who you are. I've done a lot of genealogy, and I've even done interviews and documentaries where I interview people in my family and will piece together different storylines for me to understand where I come from and who I am, not only just my history, but also like my emotional history. We, in family therapy, will develop what we call a genogram, which is essentially a family tree. And on that family tree, we have all these symbols where the relationships and different things that happen. And I've done this exercise with clients, and although it's a pretty simple exercise, it can be very illuminating to just see it in black and white on a piece of paper of like, oh, my mom went through this with her people, and then she had this repeated thing with me and my dad, and my dad had his history, and then that everything looks like it makes sense how these patterns get passed down from generation to generation. Anyway, it just makes me sad that Darcey and Stacey can't support each other, and they can't get away from this constant fear of competition and beating each other out in some comparison.
I feel like I put on a few pounds. He's never had my cooking, so since we've been in quarantine, we've been cooking a lot. So what are you doing to stay fit during quarantine? Well, you know, keeping busy with, getting it on.
You know how it is.
What about you guys? Oh. Got your guy here, Stace.
Yeah,
Did you
get our
break
cardio in, that's for sure.
Oh, cardio. What do you guys do?
No.
He likes to lift me up. No complaints.
Well, I haven't heard you guys down the hallway, so it must be.
I mean, what? It's not even palatable competition between the two of them. It's just so ugly that this immediate, no matter what you're talking about, that, you know, she says self-deprecatingly, Stacey says, oh, I've put on a couple pounds, you know, I'm all inside all the time. And then Darcey's like, well, I haven't put on pounds. You know why? It's because we've been having sex all the time. Have you been having sex? And she's like, oh yeah, we've been having our cardio. And Darcey says, cardio? That's weird. Like, what kind of sex is that? You know, it's just, I mean, right into it, like immediately. And again, I assume it has to do with a long-standing pattern of reactivity to each other that has to do with trauma. It was their reaction to trauma. Now, another speculation I might have now that I'm on the trauma topic is that as kids are being traumatized, they will develop ways of distracting themselves from the pain. They're helpless. They're 4, 8 years old. They're helpless. They don't know what to do. And so as bad things are happening to them, they'll figure out some way to distract themselves. And one of the ways that kids will distract themselves is through bickering. This sort of bickering. It's like if you're bickering with your twin sister, you don't have the brain power to think about the horrible things that are happening in your life. I don't know, but it just sort of brings that up as a speculation. Let's rewind and watch that again.
You know how it is.
What about you guys? Got your guy here, Stace.
Yeah.
Did
You
you
get our
break in?
cardio in, that's for sure.
Oh, cardio. What do you guys do?
No.
He likes to lift me up. No complaints.
I haven't heard you guys down the hallway, so it must be. Oh, he's so sweet.
Aw. How's it like living together?
It's good, you know. We're really getting to know each other really well, and I feel like what doesn't hurt us makes us stronger.
Is she getting on your nerves yet?
Stacey, why would you say that? No, I'm just trying to like deal with quarantine. Obviously, I had to leave the kids, so that's been tough.
It's just, there are situations on this show that, and these other shows that you'll have me watch that make me feel icky. But when twin sisters, you know, it's one thing for Darcey and Jesse to go at it and to have resentment building up and competition because they barely know each other. But Darcey and Stacey have been together since the beginning by definition. They've been through all the same problems, the same family situation, the same bullying at school. They both lost their brother. And to see them so, I don't know what to say, hostile towards each other, it breaks my heart, really, because they should at least have each other to turn to, at the very least being neutral to each other, right? And the hostility is just really painful to watch.
I understand maybe he's going through separation, but still, why put yourself in this situation and live with somebody and rush a relationship when they're technically still married?
So where's your wife?
She's in Maryland.
Does she know where you are?
No, we don't talk with her since more than a year.
I mean, listen, I'm not here to judge, but
Look, I'm not here to judge, but, and then she rolls her eyes. I mean, she's clearly judging. So, I don't know. We'll see what she says here.
you can't really start your life with this hanging over your head, you know?
Okay, so I just want to challenge what she just said. You can't start your life with this hanging over your head. Okay, what does that mean? These sorts of phrases you'll see people say. Can someone date while they are separated? Like, let's even take someone that isn't planning on getting a divorce. You know, we have different levels, right? You have separation, a trial separation, if you will. Georgie, it's not a trial separation. It's a process of divorcing. But for some people, they'll say, let's take a trial separation for a year, 6 months. Let's see how it goes. I believe there's even a legal way to divvy up the finances during this time. And you give it a try and you see how it goes for 6 months, and with the expectation of, well, maybe we'll get back together, but maybe we won't. But we definitely need to separate, so let's do that. Is it okay for someone to date in a situation like that? Morally or ethically, or is it a good choice to date in that situation? Well, case by case basis. Certainly based on what I just said, indicates nothing as to the health or unhealth of someone dating in a situation like that. Someone could absolutely date in such a situation. They could meet someone and be like, they could even make an online profile where, like, by the way, I'm separated from my spouse and we don't know if we're going to get divorced or not, or whatever. Or the very first date. By the way, just want to tell you that I'm still technically married. We got separated. If this is a deal breaker to you, then, it's okay with me, but I just want to tell you my situation because I want to give us a try. You tell the situation. Under most circumstances, dating, people understand, takes time. You might date for years before you decide to get engaged. So who cares in the beginning if the person, as long as everyone's being truthful and there's no real threat there, which there isn't when you're in a situation like that. So when Stacey says something like, you need to wrap that up, you can't move on with your life. So let's look at a situation where a divorce takes a long time, the technical side of it. That he says he hasn't even talked to her in a year. So he's not supposed to date anybody in that time. Now, I think to Stacey, what she's saying is, Darcey is the sort of person who wants to get married right away, and she wants to accelerate this relationship right away. You guys are living together right now. Darcey isn't allowed to see her own kids because of your relationship, and you're not even technically single yet. You're still technically married. Maybe that should have waited. Well, I don't know. As a couples therapist, clinically speaking, I don't have an answer to that. So, let's rewind and watch that a little bit.
I mean, listen, I'm not here to judge, but you can't really start your life with this hanging over your head, So just want to make sure that you're okay with this situation. No, I'm not. Deep down inside, I want to.
Now, as usually the case, when people have reactions on the show, and I'm like, wait a second, where does that come from? Like age difference in relationships. It usually points to a cultural understanding that everyone just takes for granted that isn't true. And then we think, well, why do people have these cultural understandings that don't make any logical sense? And I think there is a cultural there's a cultural understanding that immigrants are stupid, for example. There's a lot of people in the United States who think immigrants are stupid. Florian has an accent, he's dumb, these kinds of things. We understand that's a stupid assumption, right? That doesn't make any sense. But it's a cultural understanding that is a socially constructed idea that we don't explicitly say or communicate to each other, but we do it subtly by rolling our, I'm not going to judge, but boy, I don't know about that one. And we're communicating to our kids, to everyone around us, that the social norm is this. And if you want to fit into the social norm, if you want to be accepted by society, this is what you do. And dating while you're still technically married will get some people to roll their eyes. Now, in my point of view, that doesn't make any sense. So in the same way that you could be technically divorced and still not be a good candidate to date, being technically divorced or not doesn't necessarily indicate the person is a good catch or not. But anyway, my point is that if my assumption is correct, which I don't know, I can only speak from my own experience and my own opinion, which is that what we know about Georgie thus far doesn't indicate any red flag at all, really. He hasn't seen her in a year. They were going to get technically divorced, and it can take months to go through that process. But the pandemic hit, and now it's slowing things down. Okay. To Stacey, she's like, oh, that's a problem. Okay. So why would we as a culture, because I think a lot of people would agree with Stacey. A lot of people would. And so why would Stacey and a lot of other people in culture have that idea? Well, I think it's because we have a heuristic about that's based on something that's real. So let's actually get a real situation where we would say, oh, that is a problem. Well, let's say someone is married, for example, or they lie to people and say that they are, about to get divorced, or they're not married, but they are married. Okay, we've all heard of these stories where people are cheating and they're saying, oh, you know what, me and my wife, we're going through a divorce. This is actually a classic cheating thing that people will say online. Some of you might have even experienced, some of you may have even done this to people, where in your mind you're thinking, at least that week, you're like, yeah, I definitely want to leave my spouse, because you have this up and down. I've actually had clients like this where they'll have up and down motivation to be in the marriage. And when they're having down motivation, they go online, they start to flirt with people, they go on a couple dates, and they're like, oh, by the way, just want I'm technically married, but our marriage is definitely over. It's been over for years. And so just know that, don't worry about it. It'll be over, and you and I can be together, and it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. And then 5 years later, the person's still married. Okay. Now, why would someone do that? I can go into the details as the various reasons why. Obviously, psychopathy is one, but other is just fantasy life and denial and this sort of thing. But anyway, the point is that situation, we would say, well, that's wrong. The person that's married is lying. They're lying either to themselves or to the other person or both or whatever. That's a problem. And the person that you're dating is getting the short end of the stick for sure. They're getting screwed over. They're being humiliated and dragged along and, manipulated and deceived. Okay, that's wrong. Well, I think from that very, accurate identification of a wrong situation, we look for the markers of that. And we're like, well, okay, what's the tagline? What's the summary? Well, you have a technically married person who is dating someone. That's wrong. And then we just walk away. Okay, now I know the solution. Anytime someone is technically married, they're a dog and there's a problem there. When instead of, no. It wasn't that they were technically married. That wasn't the element that was the problem. That actually had nothing to do with it. The problem was the individual who was technically married either was knowingly or unknowingly deceiving themselves and the other person that they were going to get a divorce when they never were going to get a divorce. That was the problem. But that's harder to retain and identify and remember and get explained. It's a much more nuanced identification of what was the problem. And so I think a lot of people pull away from that problem situation. Okay, anytime I see someone that's technically married and they're dating, that is absolutely a problem. And until they show the fact that they are divorced, then I can't trust them. That's one thing. The other cultural understanding that I actually have a problem with as well is that a lot of people equate legal marriage with a spiritual or, love marriage, if you will. So a lot of people will, because our society puts this stamp on things. Now let's rewind the clock 20 years, or even 25 years when I first entered the field of couple and family therapy. Back then, my field was called marriage and family therapy, but my program was called couple and family therapy because at that time, gay people could not legally get married. And so we didn't want to just say we were there for marriages. We wanted to say we were there for couples. And we also wanted to include people that just never wanted to get married or people who were pre-married. They were going to get married in the future. So we wanted to call it couple and family therapy. In fact, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist because we retain that old language. Now gay people can get married, but we also want to include other people that aren't technically married, right? So we have this privilege around marriage as opposed to not being married. And it goes way back. It goes back literally hundreds of years where you're not legitimate unless you have that legal stamp of approval. And so for me, early on, I'm guessing this is where it comes from, I learned that a legal stamp of approval didn't really mean anything. There were many marriages that had a legal stamp of approval, heterosexual marriages 25 years ago, that were not legitimate at all. There was no love, there was deceit, there was no connection. And then I would look at another couple that I was treating and a gay couple, and they, by law, could never get that legal stamp of approval. And yet they had all the love in the world and all the connection and all the look of a long-term, dedicated, forever relationship. And so the fact that one couple had a legal stamp and the other couple didn't meant nothing to me. That legal stamp meant nothing. It's just paperwork that you file with the government. It is that. Now, for some people, that means, when you sign the document and you send it off, it feels official because you're reporting to the, your state or local government that you're getting married, and it's a big deal. It feels like there's nothing wrong with having it feel ceremonialized. But I think most of us can agree, the government doesn't justify the relationship. The people justify the relationship. Two people can fall in love and say, we're married. Why does the government get to designate who is married or not? Why can't we decide that for ourselves? Why do we want the government to tell us that information? Again, particularly because in the past, the government, by law, did not recognize same-sex marriage. So we know the government doesn't know what they're talking about all the time when it comes to matters of love and dedication and connection and health in a relationship. So I think that's another heuristic that we have that is like, unless it has the stamp of approval by the government, or unless the stamp of approval is saying that it's over, then it's not really over. But I think most of us can, zoom out a little bit and go, well, that's just government paperwork. That has nothing to do with what's actually happening. Because again, let's use the reverse. Let's say that Georgie did get the stamp of approval of divorce a year ago. Let's say that happened a year ago. Well, does that mean Georgie is not still emotionally involved with his ex? No, it doesn't mean anything. He could be totally enmeshed with his ex, even though they had that stamp of approval. The paperwork means something, but it doesn't mean everything.
I'll be there for him, and I want to work this out, but I have kids, and a family too, and I don't want them to think I'm ever going to get hurt again.
Yeah, you can't keep this a secret. You gotta.
Yeah, that's why I'm telling you. It's a relief to tell Stacey. I don't have to hide that, but I can't help but feel that energy from her and see that all over her face. So, in a weird way, I do feel a bit judged.
In a weird way, you do feel a bit judged? I would say there's always a lot of judgment between the two sisters, particularly from Darcey to Stacey, but also from Stacey to Darcey.
We care for each other. I want to work this out with them.
Well, I wish you guys well, and hope it works out. She deserves love.
Thank you.
Now, I will say, Georgie continues to impress me. His reaction here, what do you do in a situation like that? There's not a lot you can do. And so he's just listening and he's not reactive. I keep waiting for him to show some kind of problem where there it is, there's the issue. But we have seen on this show where, Florian will get real up in arms, real aggressive, real hostile. Georgie is listening, he's explaining himself, and as the concerns come in, he doesn't seem to be triggered. Who knows? We'll watch together. That's the benefit this time watching this show, as I'm watching it real time, meaning this episode just came out, yesterday or a couple days ago. And you all don't know if Georgie is a disaster or not in the same way that I don't know. But so far, there's been an absence of problems. Let's just put it that way.
And on a happy note, you're not the only one married. What do you mean? What are you talking about? We're married. How
this work? So
we did it. It's official. Where?
So you married during the quarantine?
Yeah. Quarantine style.
All right. So Stacey is certainly within her rights to reveal her marriage however she wants. If I were to be there, I'd be a little birdie on Stacey's shoulder, and I would say something like, Darcey is going to feel hurt by this. We could predict that Darcey's going to feel hurt that she wasn't informed or she wasn't involved. She's going to feel hurt that she was excluded somehow. She's going to feel like she was purposefully excluded. And both you and your sister might have a lot of traumas about being excluded from life. So you could head that off at the pass by saying something like, Darcey, I'm so sorry, and I know this is going to hurt your feelings, but I want to tell you that we got married, and I want you to be happy for me, but I'm open to hearing about your feelings. I'm open to hear, if I hurt your feelings by doing this. I hope you understand why we did it this way. Let me explain. But I'm sorry if this hurts your feelings because, frankly, I think my feelings would be hurt too. It's okay that there are those feelings. So let's see what happens.
It was like my own Cinderella moment. It was crazy. Why did you keep it from us? Like, why?
To keep it from us. I tell everybody.
Because I didn't really know how you felt. I kind of felt like the last time we left off, it was you.
So, yeah, I didn't figure Florian in this. Florian, I think, is building or has built a resentment to Darcey and doesn't want any of this. So I'm guessing a triangle is going to happen where Darcey and Florian are going to have words and Stacey's going to feel like she's in the middle. I think Stacey might often feel this way in her life, particularly with Darcey being in the middle. And then I'm guessing Georgie is just going to stay out of it.
Kind of upset with Florian and me, and I didn't really need the negative feedback. It was just like, so are you guys now over any of your trust issues?
Yikes. So back to the competition. What is Stacey supposed to say here? That's just... All right. Well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle, in which I watch Darcey and Stacey and react to it. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.